Sophie Cunningham, no longer an Indiana Fever. Is that true? Why are people saying that? And it gets wilder. Let's talk about it. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate all your support. Hope you're having a fantastic day. And of course, shout out to the 19. So, Sophie Cunningham, you may have seen this going around a lot, and here's why, talking about the fact that she is no longer with the Indiana Fever. Now, what I said was wild. I'll just get to that real quick. And I went looking again. I should have saved it, couldn't find it. Was actually people were putting out there, no, this isn't true. Sophie Cunningham has already signed a 4-year deal with the Indiana Fever to take her through 2029. And then that started going around. This is what's absolutely wild about the internet. And this is why there are things that get a lot of views for a lot of YouTubers that you don't see me talking about because I do a little bit of research and they'll, even though it's going to cost me a lot of views, which has been insane this past off season, I feel like I'm ready to hit the shutdown button. But it's because so much isn't true. And, even people that I don't necessarily like Angel Reese, there are a lot of quotes that go around being attributed to her that I just know off the top of my head, there's no way I know she didn't say it. Or if I'm iffy, I go looking, and if she didn't, I'm not even going to do a video on it. But first of all, Sophie Cunningham can't have signed a deal for with Indiana. We're kind of in a holding pattern. No one's going to do that because they don't know what the CBA is going to be for the next season. But I want to talk about the expansion draft. We talked about this briefly before, and the fact that we knew they were going to be able to or not be able to protect as many players as they did last year, which was 6, because you have 2 teams, right? Twice as many, 2 teams picking now. And then the trickier part, and this is why I say the whole thing with Sophie is gone or she's here. I'm going to give you a why about that, but also why it's not necessarily a done deal. And that's because we don't know what the CBA is going to look like. And that is important to think about as well. So, what it ends up being is teams can protect 5 players now, 5, not 6, but what makes it tricky is because they knew the CBA was coming, so many players are free agents this season, which is what's going to make it very, very tricky into how that is going to play in. Because I believe, and I don't think this has changed in everything that I've looked for, an unrestricted free agent can be one. I think the limit is one. The expansion teams can select one unrestricted free agent, and then of course you have the core issue. So if there's a unrestricted free agent who's going to be cored, they can be drafted by the expansion team, and then they can core that player as all. And that is where it gets very, very tricky. And of course, I know most of you follow me. You're very much interested in the Indiana Fever, and so many of you interested in Sophie Cunningham and Lexie Hull, especially. So we're just going to go and talk about the Indiana Fever for now and how this impacts them. And believe it or not, right now, the Indiana Fever have 3.5. I'll call 3.5 players under contract. But what I mean by that, Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, both still on their rookie deals. Caitlin in her 3rd year, Aaliyah Boston in her 4th and final year of her rookie deal, Michaela Timpson in her rookie deal as well. And then Lexie Hull is a restricted free agent. What does that mean? It means she can go look at other teams, talk to other teams, get an offer, and then the Indiana Fever have a right to match that offer. So even if they want to keep Lexie Hull, and even though they can match anything, it's going to come down to a lot of other factors. What the salary cap is. We know last year the Fever did a terrible job of managing the salary cap, right? So if they don't work on that, they could end up in a situation where, yeah, they want to bring Lexie Hull back, but they can't afford to pay her what she can get elsewhere. So if she decides to go, then she's going to go. So they have to keep that in mind as well. Because a lot of times teams look, in free agency, a lot of times teams will overpay. That's what happens. That's why players love free agency. So a team may, or, they may think, hey, you know what? They're going to match. I know they want to keep Lexi Hull. They're going to match. So we're going to give her an offer that's probably more than we might want to. Now we'll be okay with it if she comes over, but it's going to be more than we might otherwise because we just want to force Indiana to spend that money on Lexi Hull. Then they can't spend that money elsewhere. I know it's sneaky. But so you've got, and then of course, Kelsey Mitchell can be cored one more time. So Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Lexi Hull, Michaela Timpson, they're the ones under contract. They're going to protect them, and then they're going to protect Kelsey Mitchell, and they will core her if necessary. So yeah, that means now Sophie Cunningham's unrestricted free agent anyway. But yes, and I believe she can be cored. So yes, she's going to be left unprotected. And yes, she could be drafted and cored. Okay. So it's sort of it's out of the Indiana Fever's hands. Now, that being said, we talk about the big things that we keep hearing about with the CBA, right? The salaries and the revenue share. Salaries, revenue share, salaries, revenue share. We hear about all like that's all we hear about. And I always say, now there are all these other little things that are going to have to be hammered out as well. One of them that kind of got a little bit of attention was the whole, living arrangement thing and what teams provide versus what players will have to do, and that's going to be an issue as well. But then, of course, again, with things like this, what about coring? I believe there's always going to be something like that, but players may demand that only can happen once. Maybe it can only happen once. Maybe it can only happen under more restrictive circumstances with players. So the new CBA could get done, and this is where it really gets tricky with expansion, right? Sophie Cunningham, they could be like, oh well, no, we want to change this, so maybe it becomes a situation where Sophie Cunningham cannot be cored, and yet the fever, it gets tricky because and yet the fever can only protect five. Mm, they're not going to protect an unrestricted free agent who can't be cored. And by the way, it could, and now unless they've already said this is going to stay for this first year of the CBA, maybe, so it doesn't change because obviously that would change things dramatically if, say, Kelsey Mitchell could not be cored by the Indiana Fever. And then it gets trickier because then they have to figure out, well, if expansion teams can take an unrestricted free agent, but they can't be cored, but it's the only way to ensure that they have enough players for their roster, right? This is an absolute mess. And again, this goes to leadership. And this is one of the things that a lot of people aren't talking about with this that I'm going to give you is this was, as they say, piss poor planning, folks, from the top down to because this is not done overnight, right? Like this wasn't yesterday where we decided we're going to have two expansion teams playing this year in 2026 while knowing that there's going to be a new CBA. Like that may be one of the dumbest things you could do. I mean, that right there, forget all the other stuff. Forget the things that get the players in their feels about not being appreciated and all this other crap. That right there, forget how Caitlin Clark was handled coming into the league. This is a fireable offense for Kathy Engelbert to not plan ahead and understand what it would do to have two expansion teams coming into the league the same year in which you need to have a new CBA. And then you're going to end up with all these players who are free agents, right? It's like 80% of the league are free agents. So yeah, we have a little bit more clarity because of the five teams and the coring and all that, but we don't know what is going to get changed in the CBA going forward. We don't know. We don't know. So I'm going to say it's 75-25 that Sophie Cunningham is gone, but the rules may change. And players can also make it very clear they don't want to go to a certain place. Like, do you really want a player? If a player comes to you and says, it's done, and look, I don't like it in general, but I'm not going to make more of an issue with it if women do it because men do it a lot, right? Like, hey, Kobe Bryant did it, man. As much as I like Kobe Bryant, I didn't like that nonsense that he pulled with the draft. He should have been a Charlotte Hornet. Eli Manning did the same thing. Oh, I'm not going to go play for the Chargers. They better if they draft me, I'm not playing there. Now that being said, someone like Caitlin Clark maybe ought to use her leverage and say, hey, you know what? You kept Stephanie White here because I mean, first of all, we know Caitlin's convinced that Stephanie White's a good coach for her. She's not, right? But you have that, some players have that kind of power. Hopefully, Caitlin wakes up and says, "Hey, you know what? You're gonna have to change the coach, or you're gonna leave me unprotected. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go play for Sandy in Toronto. How cool would that be? I think that would be a cool story. Sandy takes a team to a you know what won the title last year, gets fired. Caitlin Clark, all the nonsense she's been through, goes and plays for an expansion team in Toronto with Sandy and wins the title. Just saying, kind of cool. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and give me your predictions. Who do you think stays? And I don't mean because we'll make it trickier. I think it's pretty clear cut who the five are going to be, but who do you think is going to make up or not necessarily make up the roster? Ultimately, of the players who played on the Fever last year, who do you think is going to return, even though they might be a free agent? There's going to be changes, but who do you think is going to return? Let me know in the comments below. Appreciate you checking out the video. Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. Go have the day you deserve.